And
does it matter at all now that people have bigger TVs with bigger resolution and that kind of stuff? I mean, do you have to be more careful? Do you have to be more of an artist, or is it that doesn't matter so much, or what?
I think it does help in some ways, but I am sort of like now straddling kind of this whole new technology myself, and so we're shooting on the 7D right now, the Canon 7D, and I'm able to to still do a lot of what I've done, pretty much the same way I've done it in the past, with very few refinements. But then again, the whole goal of makeup is really to do it in a lot of ways as light as possible. But say like in some cases, there might have to be things like going back to full face appliances rather than breaking things down into small pieces. But I think that, but we have a lot of new materials again, like also things like these new prostate appliances, which were developed a few years ago for Passion of the Christ. They're actually medical adhesive appliances, which are they're kind of like tattoos in a way, dimensional tattoos. And, you make them all kinds of, wounds and all kinds of other little appliances. And actually a lot of the old age appliances for Benjamin Button, were made this way. So it's really kind of the technology is improved in some ways for us, and also maybe we might be getting to things like, CGI and things like that also, which if it's married well with what we do, is good.
When you say they're tattoos, do you mean that they stay on for like an extended period of time, or do they come off every day?
You can take them off. Well, in the case of what I was just talking about, these are sort of like actual dimensional pieces. Like they actually are three-dimensional. So like they're a sculpted piece, which is then molded a certain way, and they're actually filled with a medical adhesive that we use. It's a water-based medical adhesive, and then it goes through a drying process. It's kind of technical, but in the end, you end up with a little piece which is basically attached to a sheet of plastic on one side and a sheet of paper on the other side, and it's kind of an old like decal, like old model kit decals. And then eventually you're able to attach this because it's medical adhesive, it's sticky. So you can actually mount it to a person's skin, attach it, and then you use water to slide the paper off, like an old model kit decal, like I was saying.
Okay.
And it actually ends up being like a little dimensional piece. And again, in Passion of the Christ, if anybody had seen that, Jim Caviezel is covered in those. In a lot of the scenes, his body is covered in those pieces because A, they were lightweight, B, they can be actually made either transparent or they can be made like color, like flesh, and painted like flesh really easily. And they're also really easy to apply and make, and so there's a lot of advantages to them. So it's a new technology based on a material that we've had for a number of years, but somebody was kind of playing around with it and came up with something new, and it really just, it kind of revolutionized things because we're making all kinds of new little pieces that actually are more realistic these days than they ever have.
I understand that when they filmed The Dark Knight, that the Two-Face's effects was not makeup. That when he was doing the acting, he was doing it with a green screen mask or something on his face.
Yeah.
But even then, there's still, as an artist who's doing, makeup, there's still that makeup component. I mean, have you done any work like that?
I am moving into
what do you feel about? How do you feel about that? As far as
I think it's. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's an interesting aspect because it actually can do things to the face really physically that we can't. But I somehow just never seem to feel that we're ever going to be completely decimated. A lot of the other techniques like stop motion is still being used to this day, and not to the extent it used to be, but because it doesn't have to be. But I've kind of experimented with a few things like that, and I think we're going to do a couple effects like that in our films coming up soon, and I think it's an interesting way to change the human face.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a couple of things I just wanted to bring up. Once, you mentioned Harryhausen what's interesting is even my kids who are 10 and 15 know who he is.
Sure.
And one from Monsters Incorporated, and then watching like things like Clash of the Titans. And the other thing you talk about stop motion that's still being used is that both of my boys love doing stop motion movies.
Oh, cool.
And it's and even at 10 years old, he understands the concept, and it's funny to watch him do this because it's going to turn out terrible. But when you put it all together, it really comes out well.
It's funny too because it's very hands-on. It's a great learning tool. Yeah.
And kids can and of course after half an hour or even less is they can film something and then see it. And so it's just kind of cool. I enjoyed watching them to put these together and putting them online.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I remember doing that as a kid, but with Super 8, and boy, we didn't have the advantage of the speed. I mean, we had to wait a couple weeks sometimes for the film to come back. So, and then we get to see really how bad we were, but we had loads of fun doing it.
Yeah.
I would say. But that was great. I mean, I had a great time.
Sometimes when I watch like a horror movie or a sci-fi or something like that, and sometimes you watch something that you think is decent, and then when the monster or whatever shows up, it looks like crap. While other times you can watch something online, and then you're like blown away by the quality. In your opinion, what is the difference, in the quality, how it shows up on screen? Is it lighting and everything in combination, or is it just purely the makeup artist type person?
It is. But that's a really good question because I believe me, I'm guilty of both of those sorts of things. I mean, I've done some things that I cringe at thinking of, with the effect and really kind of how it really didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. But as in the case of Camera Obscura, where really, I mean, I wasn't reinventing the wheel on that show, and the way it was shot really made it look good. And it is actually a lot of it. It's because everything is a collaboration, anyways. So if your director of photography doesn't know lighting well and it doesn't really know composition well and stuff like that, and anything that you do, even the best piece that you make, may not end up looking as good. And I've worked on plenty of films where I've done, I think, really some very good work, and it just wasn't shot well, because a lot of times we just have to rush through these things, and I've just had to learn to accept, that you just kind of gotta get it done and move on. So sometimes it is my fault sometimes, or it is sometimes the fault of the effects artist because maybe they just don't have the time or the budget. But a lot of times it's just sort of a collaborative thing, and it doesn't work because it's just really the rush nature of the business.